In this video, I want to talk about some new details in Naughty Dog's multiplayer job postings that hint that Factions 2 might be a multi-platform experience. Dr. Pooplove here, and the other day, Naughty Dog Jobs posted a tweet advertising a position for a UI technical designer. Now, I haven't been paying too much attention to the job postings lately. It hasn't seemed like there's been much notable, and I mean, even with this posting, you would expect Factions 2 to come with some sort of HUD and UI. So this job posting kind of came as no surprise. But when I did take a look at it, something interesting did catch my eye. In the bonus skills of this posting, where it states that a bonus skill for the candidate would be to have multiplayer experience with different platforms or games shipped for different platforms. Now, I'm not sure why Naughty Dog would list this as something they are looking for unless they're planning to bring Factions 2 to multiple platforms, or at least exploring that possibility. Of course, which other platforms would still be a question, which I think is at least partially answered by this other job posting for an associate multiplayer quality assurance tester, which seems to suggest that Factions 2 is at least likely to come to PS4 in addition to PS5, as one of the required skills is to have a working knowledge of PS4 and PS5 systems. And so based on these two postings, and even though we don't really know when this game is coming out, it does seem that Naughty Dog is at least planning to not keep this game only to PS5. I know we've heard that Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine will come to PS5 only, but it seems like that's not going to be the case for Factions 2, based on these postings. And now there has been some debate that I've seen in forums and on the Last of Us Factions Discord about whether Factions 2 would or should come strictly to PS5, or would it also come to PS4 and even maybe come to PC? And I think it makes total sense that even if this game is not coming out until 2034, that it should at least come to PS4 in addition to PS5, and that's because of one crucial thing that can really make or break a multiplayer: the player base. Any veterans of the original Factions know that a bifurcated or limited player base really hurts a multiplayer game's chances at long-term survival. Remember on PS3 when Factions broke its modes up into parties and no parties, and then you were later split on whether you owned the first set of DLC maps and or the second set of DLC maps? You had way too many player pools to choose from. And then, then they remastered the game for PS4, and those of us still on PS3 were stuck alone in a hacker and cheater-ridden hellscape with a super small player pool that is actually not too different from the current state of PS4 Factions. But my point is, a smaller player base is not good for a multiplayer to thrive and have a longer life, as low player counts lead to lack of dev support and leave us in our current situation where walls are just optional. And because PS5s are so hard to get these days, it doesn't make sense for Factions 2 to only come to that console and be limited to a very small player pool of PS5 only players who happen to like multiplayer third-person shooters, especially when PS4 was one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and there are many, many people who will still be playing PS4 by the time this game releases. So it at least makes sense for Factions 2 to come to PS4 and PS5 and be cross-play, with perhaps, the PS5 version being the better experience in terms of FPS or resolution. But what about coming to PC? Now, Sony does have a precedent of bringing some of their games over to PC, like Horizon and God of War, but these have been brought over years after their original release. So I think it would make sense, and there is some precedent for Naughty Dog to potentially bring a multiplayer over to PC. I guess the question would be when? Do they do it day and date on the same day of release to give the game the best possible player base? Or do they wait for some numbers to dwindle on the PS4 and PS5 and then bring it to PC to re-jumpstart the player base? I don't know, but either one of these scenarios I think makes more sense than to just leave it off of PC altogether. Personally, I have some fear about dealing with mouse and keyboard players. I like playing with my controller. I don't want to feel like I have to learn how to play on mouse and keyboard. I also have some fears about the possibility of dealing with hackers, since it seems to be easier to do that on PC. But I also recognize that if Factions 2 comes to PC, then its chances of becoming one of those big multiplayers that gets longer term support is greatly increased. And ultimately, I think that's a good thing. And so I will be fine if it does come to PC. But what do you think? Do you think this means that Factions 2 will come to more than just the PS5? And is that an acceptable thing for you? Let me know in the comments. And if you would like to see how I think Sony's Bungie acquisition will make an impact on Factions 2, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.